Welcome to a new video on NEGAYO's channel, friends. I've already had the chance to watch Watchmen movie Chapter 1, which, in case you weren't aware, is a new adaptation of this story that we already know, although this time promising to be more faithful to the original material. In this video, I give my brief thoughts on this new animation, if it's worth watching, and how it compares to Zack Snyder's 2009 version. For me it is, and I'll tell you why, making some brief observations. Of course, if you like this review and analysis, tell me in the comments if you would be interested. Later, I plan to extensively compare the comic, live action, and both parts of this animation. I believe this could lead to something fascinating. Remember to like the video to help it perform well in the YouTube algorithm, which greatly benefits me financially. Last time the goal for the chicken maruchan wasn't met, can you take care of that? No? First things first, does this new adaptation comply with being more faithful to the original material? Answer yes. Something I've always noticed when it comes to Watchmen is that certain people praise the live-action version a lot, which is supposedly like watching the comic itself on screen. The movie's faithfulness is striking to me, as I've never seen it portrayed that way before, despite having many identical scenes. But honestly, I feel that those kinds of opinions lean more towards the visual and leave everything else aside, like the atmosphere, the original vision, story, missing characters, changes in places, and the fact that the subjects are not real heroes are some examples. Rorschach is not actually someone motivated by what's right, and his philosophy is wrong, even though in the live action they make it seem the opposite, almost justifying his murders. Watchmen is not entirely about realistic characters. It's also a satire of the beloved comic stories we cherish. Before anyone comments, I didn't bring this up to hate on or diminish the 2009 movie. Despite its flaws, I really like this movie. Rather, I've mentioned all these points so you can get an idea of what Watchmen is about. If you've only seen the live-action adaptations and haven't read the original story, your understanding of the narrative is likely quite different from the source material. And if you compare this movie with this animation, you're going to say, what the hell? Roger Miro here looks like a madman. This meeting with Zack Snyder never happened. While not entirely faithful to the comic due to its duration, this animation rescues many scenes, dialogues, and elements from Maury Gibbons' original work. Electric cars with unique designs and Rorschach scaling buildings are examples. With this cable is the comedian's original suit, the mention of the island, Captain Metropolis, the meeting of these two, the tale of the black ship, which in the live action we only find in the extended version. We don't have an exact copy of the comic, but we do have several images taken directly from the pages. The movie's visual excellence is highly appreciated, especially since other aspects were not compromised to prioritize visuals alone. During this animation, I also noticed that inevitably other original elements were added in some scenes. And maybe you don't care about this, but if you're like me and you like to pay attention to every damn detail, then this might be interesting to you. For those unfamiliar with Watchmen, as I mentioned, the characters are not superheroes and lack any superhuman abilities. I really like the scene where Bates slams the comedian several times against the building's window because, as the detective said, these glasses don't break easily. The blood splattering on Dr. Manhattan's face when Blake murders this woman, the statues crying at the funeral, Daniel immediately recognizing Laurie and implying faster than ever, has he stopped thinking about her? The way they included this ship's story without being boring like in the comic, and where I think they really shone. It was in the origin scene of this character. I enjoy both the live-action and animated versions. Each faithfully adapts the comic in its own way, with the animation adding certain elements, where, in addition to the accident and his transformation, they also explain how this character sees the world, how he feels, being trapped in the past, present, and future at the same time, unable to do anything to escape. And even though Dr. Manhattan is not an expressive character, you can feel that desperation knowing that even if a tragedy awaits him in the future, he can't avoid it. Because for him, he is already living that moment, and at the same time, he has already lived it even though it hasn't happened yet. These gifts are all a mess, and yet I think they explained them almost perfectly in this whole scene. In addition to a better emphasis on the why, he ended up being a physicist given that in his childhood he learned from his father how to fix clocks. And how does this influence help him rebuild himself once he suffers this accident? Superman exists and he's American. The live-action version has elements of Zack Snyder, very good in many scenes, a lot of drama, more spectacle. The soundtrack is great, and needless to say, the cast is perfect. Jackie Hall delivered a tremendous performance. As mentioned, this video isn't intended to discredit the director. Despite being labeled a Snyder hater for not agreeing with everything he does, I recognize his work has flaws. I quite like this movie despite the new adaptation's animation and music not being standout. Despite not being from well-known artists, I enjoyed it more than the live-action version. It's an end-of-the-world movie, yes, but you can tell that somehow those involved in this film have love and respect for the work. Despite adding details, dialogues, and original scenes as necessary, they stayed true to the vision of Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. And that's commendable. We had 3 animated Warner Brothers movies this year about the Tomorrowverse, and with regret. But I followed this universe to the letter, and not even a Crisis movie pleased me as much as Watchmen Chapter 1. In summary, while live action adds and removes elements from the original work to capture the director's vision of these characters, Zack Snyder either misunderstood the characters as he has before or simply chose not to portray them accurately. To create a more spectacular and exciting work for the casual audience, which is understandable. The animation also removes and adds details to the film, but to make this movie more organic. And along the way, the important thing is that it does not lose the fidelity of the Watchmen world. However, while the animation and performances could have been better, it doesn't detract from what they still deliver. An exceptional film with impressive cinematography that seems atypical for a Warner Brothers production. Animation, that is, I'm not saying that this film is on par with high-budget movies that go straight to the cinema. Detective Comics has stepped up their game with the home format this time, putting in more effort compared to what we're accustomed to seeing from them. Once the second chapter comes out, in 2025, we'll talk about whether this is the definitive adaptation of one of the most emblematic stories in comics in general. It's fine if you prefer the live action, as it's a good movie and you might favor the animation style. That's also very good, as it's better adapted and more faithful to the Watchmen universe. The film you consider superior depends on each person's taste and what you're looking for when watching a movie. Now, if you're like Alan Moore and believe that none of the adaptations are better than the comic, then there's nothing to be done. Anyway friends, I just wanted to share a bit of my opinion and have you tell me what you thought of this movie if you've seen it already. Please leave your comments. That's all for now. Thanks for visiting. My name is Alex for the NEGAYO channel. See you later. This face is all I need. Thank you.